For more than a year, Drew Scott simply vanished. No cameras, no television appearances, no smiling face walking excited couples through dream homes. Millions of fans who had watched him every week suddenly had no idea where he went. Some thought he quit. Some thought something had gone wrong behind the scenes. And the truth, when it finally came out, was far more painful than anyone expected. Because while the world kept spinning, Drew was fighting something invisible, something that had quietly taken over his body, stolen his energy, and forced one of the most recognizable faces on television to disappear completely. This is the story of how a man who built everything from nothing suddenly had to stop and fight just to feel normal again. And it is sadder than most people ever realized. Drew Scott came into this world 4 minutes later than anyone expected. It was April 28, 1978, in Vancouver, and his mother Joanne had already delivered his twin brother Jonathan. The doctor was done. The nurses were wrapping up. And then someone leaned in and felt something that changed everything. There was another heartbeat. In 1978, ultrasound were not routine, and the boys had been so perfectly lined up, their heartbeats so in sync, that nobody caught it. Drew slipped into the world as a complete surprise, and from that very first moment, his life carried an energy that refused to be predicted or contained. The family settled on a quiet horse farm in Maple Ridge, British Columbia. Their parents, Jim and Joanne, had come over from Scotland and built the kind of life that was full of early mornings, cold air, hard chores, and deep love. The boys hauled feed across frozen ground. They raced horses across open fields. Their mother joined their karate lessons and pushed them to stay sharp. Their father made it clear that character was not given, it was earned. Every single day, that farm shaped Drew in ways that no television set or Hollywood deal ever could. He learned to push through discomfort. He learned that hard work was not optional. And he learned that giving up was simply not something the Scott family did. By the time they were 7 years old, Drew and Jonathan were already running a real business. They called it Jam Enterprises, pulling the letters from Jonathan, Andrew, and Mom. They wrapped coat hangers in soft nylon, added small rose decorations, and went door to door selling them with big smiles and genuine effort. Sometimes doors slammed in their faces. Sometimes a neighbor bought a handful at once. And then one day, a wholesaler placed a massive order. The boys ended up earning close to $15,000. In the 1980s, for 2 small kids from a horse farm, that number felt like the whole world. Their mother walked them through every invoice and every delivery. And what they were really learning was something that would carry them for the rest of their lives. That money comes from effort, and that working together multiplies everything. At 8 years old, they took a different kind of turn. Drew became Curly, and Jonathan became Dimples. Yes, they became child clowns. They performed at birthday parties and parades, covered in paint, balancing props, while children laughed and chaos swirled around them. The gigs paid up to $100 an hour, which felt like magic. But more than the money, Drew discovered something he had not expected. He loved holding a room's attention. He loved the feeling of people watching him and staying locked in. That sensation of keeping eyes on him, of holding an audience, never fully left him. It planted a seed that would grow slowly over the next 20 years. Their teenage years were built on structure and ambition. Drew fell hard for basketball. He practiced 4 to 5 hours every single day and eventually earned a 43-inch vertical jump, the kind of number that made coaches take notice. He made the University of Calgary team. But before he could play a single official game, an injury took it away. Years later, at 25, another college offered him a spot. He tried again. But when he looked around at the younger recruits moving faster and jumping higher, he knew his time in that world had passed. He walked away from that dream, and he felt the weight of a door closing behind him. That hurt. But as painful as it was, that closed door pointed him directly toward the one that would open everything else. At just 18 years old, while most of their friends were figuring out how to pay rent, Drew and Jonathan bought their first property. They found a $200,000 fixer-upper that required only $250 down. They renovated it, rented out rooms for $800 each, lived there for free, and sold it a year later with a $50,000 profit. That moment woke something up in them. They kept going, flipping dozens of homes over the next 15 years, building real knowledge with every wall they tore down and every deal they negotiated. Drew also kept working side jobs to survive. He was a flight attendant, a personal trainer, a website designer, a mall security guard, a busboy, and even a manager at a bikini store. None of it was glamorous. All of it made him tougher. By 2004, after losing thousands of dollars to a bad real estate agent, Drew decided he had seen enough. He got his own real estate license. Jonathan did the same. And together they built Scott Real Estate Incorporated, a complete operation where Drew found and negotiated the properties, while Jonathan designed and renovated them. They opened offices in Vancouver, Calgary, and Las Vegas. They were handling up to 10 renovations at a time. They became millionaires long before any television network ever knew their names. But Drew had never let go of the idea of performing. He had tried acting through the late 90s and early 2000s, appearing in small background roles, collecting rejection after rejection, sleeping on a friend's couch during a full year in Vancouver, where he filmed auditions in his car and pushed himself until exhaustion crept into his bones. Nothing opened for him. And then in 2011, everything changed. Property Brothers premiered, and within the first season, over 1.5 million people were tuning in every single week. The show felt natural because it was natural. Drew was not playing a character. He was doing exactly what he had done for 15 years in real estate, just with cameras watching. The chemistry between the brothers was real because they were real. Families saw something genuine in how they worked together, and that honesty connected with audiences in a way that scripted television rarely does. Spin-offs followed. Awards came. Their names traveled far, beyond Canada. Scott Living launched in 2015 and pulled in over $100 million in revenue within 2 years. Books hit the New York Times bestseller list. Furniture lines filled homes across America. Their company Scott Brothers Entertainment grew to produce more than 20 original series for platforms like HGTV, Netflix, and Amazon. Drew was everywhere, and that was exactly the problem. By 2019, fans started noticing something was off. Drew was appearing less. His energy on screen seemed different. His smile was still there, but something behind the eyes had shifted. At first it looked like fatigue. Like maybe a man who had been running full speed for 20 years was simply slowing down. But the reality was far darker. Something had quietly invaded his body, and for months nobody could figure out what it was. He felt exhausted in a way that no amount of sleep could fix. His mind felt foggy and slow, like thinking through deep water. His stomach hurt regularly. Heat from studio lights made him dizzy. There were days he could barely stand on set without feeling his legs begin to give out under him. He went from doctor to doctor, hoping someone would connect the dots. Some tested him for lupus. Others suspected rare neurological conditions. Test after test came back without a clear answer, and that uncertainty scared him in a way that the cameras never saw. When the answer finally came, it was mercury poisoning combined with chronic fatigue syndrome. The mercury had come from somewhere in his environment or his diet, and it had been quietly building damage inside him for longer than he realized. The combination of the poisoning and the fatigue syndrome explained exhaustion, the brain fog, the waves of weakness that came and went without warning. Drew had to step back from Property Brothers entirely. Jonathan continued filming, handling multiple jobs on his own, while Drew focused on resting and recovering. For a man who had been moving at full speed since childhood, that sudden stillness was its own kind of hard. He kept his fans close through all of it. He posted on Instagram and YouTube about good days and bad ones. He talked openly about the frustration of hearing diagnosis after diagnosis that never quite fit. He spoke about the fear that grows when your own body starts behaving like something foreign. He admitted how much the mental weight of chronic illness hurts, the constant effort of staying hopeful when every day is unpredictable. And through all of that honesty, something unexpected happened. Fans who had watched him flip houses and negotiate deals for years suddenly felt like they truly knew him. His vulnerability connected with people in a way that success never quite had. His personal life had been quietly growing through all of this as well. Back in 2010, during Toronto Fashion Week, Drew had met a woman named Linda Fan who was dressed as the fashion police, handing out pretend tickets to anyone with a questionable outfit. He laughed. She laughed. They went out for sushi, then hot cocoa, then karaoke until the sun came up. That first night had no talk of renovation budgets or television deals. It was just two people figuring each other out. He later said he had believed in love at first sight long before that night. But what Linda gave him was something even more valuable than a spark. She gave him steadiness. They got married on May 12, 2018, in the hills of Puglia, Italy. More than 300 guests watched a ceremony that had been planned in just 3 months. The details were stunning, blending their Scottish and Vietnamese heritages into the flowers, the food, and the music. TLC filmed the whole celebration. It was beautiful and chaotic and perfect, all at the same time. They had always talked about having children, but that path was far harder than either of them expected. Over the course of 2 years, they moved through IVF and IUI treatments, carrying hope and heartbreak side by side. Then, in May 2022, on their 4th wedding anniversary, their son Parker James arrived. 2 years later, in June 2024, their daughter Piper Ray joined the family. Linda's second pregnancy was difficult, and Drew scaled back his filming schedule significantly to be there with her. He canceled travel. He slowed everything down. He chose his family over every other obligation, and he did it without hesitation. Through the recovery from his illness, through the fertility journey, through the quieter pace he had chosen in recent years, Drew Scott had become something different from the man who first walked onto camera in 2011. He had always been driven. He had always been ambitious. But now he was something more. He was present. He understood in a way that no amount of success had taught him that time moves fastest when you stop paying attention to it. Children grow before you know what happened. Moments pass while you are in the middle of a meeting or on a flight to somewhere else. And health, the thing you push hardest when everything is going well, is always the first thing that reminds you it cannot be ignored. Drew Scott disappeared from television for more than a year, and when he came back, he was moving differently. Slower, more careful, more grateful. He was not fading from the world. He was choosing which parts of the world still deserved his energy. And for a man who had been running since he was 7 years old selling coat hangers door to door, that kind of peace was not a retreat. It was the hardest thing he had ever built.